Hello, Megamaniacs, and welcome to another edition of Homebrew Review, although this one is a little bit different from others we've covered in the past. This is Treasure Island Dizzy, and Treasure Island Dizzy came out in 1988 for a lot of different platforms: ZX Spectrum, Amstrad CPC, Commodore 64, Commodore Amiga, Atari ST. It even got a port to the Nintendo Entertainment System as part of the compilation Quattro Adventure published by Camerica. The reason I consider this version a homebrew is that it was before the time of the Atari Jaguar, which came out in the 1990s, and this was released well after the time of the Atari Jaguar in the 2010s. It is a homemade port of Treasure Island Dizzy to Atari Jaguar, which was licensed by the Oliver twins, with all of the royalties that would otherwise be earned by Codemasters and the Olivers going to the National Video Game Museum and Video Game Preservation, so they are to be commended for that effort. And for those reasons, including the fact that I had not bought a new Atari Jaguar game in a very long time, I decided to support this endeavor and pick it up and do a homebrew review on it. The officially licensed Atari Jaguar version is made by Atari Age, complete in an authentic Jaguar-style cartridge, and it comes in a box with instructions as well. Although the instruction manual is not very thick, which isn't really surprising when you consider the source game is not very complex. You don't even have control of your inventory in this game. Whatever item you currently have at the top of the list is the item you use. You can't even scroll through the items. Also, the game will tell you there are two ways to beat the game, the normal and the tricky. But really, there's only one way to beat the game, because if you beat it the normal way, it will tell you you can't leave the island until you collect all of the gold coins. So to get the real ending, you have to do the, quote, tricky ending. And that is going to be a trick in and of itself, because the controls are like nothing you've ever experienced if you're familiar with typical platform games, and the Atari Jaguar D-pad being a little bit mushy and hard to use isn't very helpful in this regard. You jump by holding up. As nonsensical as that seems, that's the way games worked on home computers when you had a joystick and one button. The button was needed for actions, so a lot of times jumping was mapped to up, especially in a game where you're not necessarily going up, down, left, and right like you would in a space shooter type game. So, instead of mapping that to a button on the controller, they left it the same way on the Atari Jaguar. And, okay, there's my first problem. He can't swim without a snorkel, so that gold coin which I need to collect instantly killed me. And you only get one life in Treasure Island Dizzy, which means you have to start over from the beginning anytime you die. Frustrating? Yes. And then it gets more frustrating, at least for me. Not only is it obtuse what you do to progress through areas. For example, you need the empty chest here because you can't jump high enough to reach this platform. What? Why couldn't he just double jump, or grab the ledge and pull himself up? Why did he need to set a treasure chest there and jump on it to jump up to the next area? It's things like that that will just drive you bonkers after a while, especially if you didn't play this game back in the day and know all these tricks, which I didn't have a ZX Spectrum or an Amiga ST, or I didn't even know this game existed on Commodore 64, probably because it was mostly a European game. It seems like a lot of the Dizzy games were largely European and played by European fans. Not that I don't appreciate that they ported it here, it's just having to control my jump with the D-pad instead of a button is making everything harder to do. And when you do jump, Dizzy doesn't just exactly land where you want. He kind of has an arc, and if he arcs too much, he starts rolling because he's an egg. So trying to precisely platform with him is very hard. Although calling it platforming in the sense that we know it might even be a stretch, because it's not scrolling from one screen to the next. It's one screen at a time, and you're solving a puzzle on each screen. Again, that's the format of the original game, and this is, other than graphical or musical enhancements, it's a one-to-one port of the original game. But it just feels like this could have been improved upon. They could have made it scrolling. The Atari Jaguar is certainly a powerful enough machine to handle screen scrolling. You could do it on primitive consoles in the 1980s, like the 2600, the Intellivision, the NES, the ColecoVision. It was hard to program scrolling games, but it could be done. And the NES did it very well, I might add. It's just amazing that we're playing one screen at a time on a much more powerful system like the Atari Jaguar. Which, again, not necessarily a bad thing if that's being faithful to the original game. But making it hard to control to be faithful to the original game, that is something I can't abide. And there are not obvious solutions to the puzzles, as I already mentioned, like this room with the trap that falls on your head. I can't figure out how to trigger the trap before Dizzy gets under it, and I can't figure out how to move fast enough to get past it before it falls on him. And I don't know what item I'm supposed to have that would enable me to solve this problem. And the game is not giving me any hints as to what item I need to solve this problem. And I'm just frustrated to no end. I would like to progress in Treasure Island Dizzy, but I don't think I can, as a combination of both the way the game is programmed and the controller that I'm having to use, which is far from my favorite among all video game controllers out there. I appreciate that they were trying to do something new and interesting with the Atari Jaguar D-pad with the numeric buttons, and there are even overlays for certain games that take advantage of that, much like the Atari 5200 back in the day. But that's another console with a problematic controller, if I'm being honest about it. It's funny that the original Atari VCS kind of pioneered what we think of as video game controllers with a joystick and a firing button. And then so many of the controllers they made after that were much less friendly to use. If anybody knows how to get past this cage that drops on my head like the "We Are Number One" meme, I wish I knew how to do it, and I don't. So somebody post a comment below and explain to me what I'm doing wrong in Treasure Island Dizzy. This was not a cheap game. Atari Jaguar homebrew games end up costing minimum of $70 because they're expensive to manufacture, and this one, being complete in box with a manual, made it more expensive. So I'd really like to get further than a few screens into this game. As a result, I can't recommend it. Like, play it on the Amstrad or play it on the ZX Spectrum in emulation. Like, play it the way it was originally intended to be played. Play it on the Commodore 64 if you have the tape and a tape deck and can load it that way, or play it in a Commodore emulator. They even released it on IBM PC computers at one point, and it was just a Commodore emulator and a copy of the Commodore program that was gussied up as though it would work on Windows. But when people dug into it, that's what it was. It was the Commodore 64 version running in an emulator. So maybe that is the preferred ideal way to play Treasure Island Dizzy. But with only one life to live and cumbersome controls and hidden obscure goals that you actually have to complete, you have to find all 30 of these hidden coins to actually beat the game, and it suggests to you that you don't, but you really do. That's That's beyond tedious to me. It begs the question, what were they thinking? Like, they could have at least given you a metal detector to help you find the coins, or clues about where the coins are, or clues about what items you need, or inventory control so you don't just pick the top item in your inventory when you hit the action button. If you could scroll through your items, that would be more helpful. There are just so many design choices that seem like they were made because of the limitations of computers like the ZX Spectrum, that when it was put on different video game consoles, they could have overcome those limitations, gone beyond those limitations, deviated from those limitations, but they did not. I'm not saying Treasure Island Dizzy is a bad game. I'm just saying I can't jump over this and I can't go under this trap, and I just don't know what to do, and I surrender to this game. You have beat me, good sir. Oliver Twins, you win this round. Until somebody can tell me what I need to do here, that's where this homebrew review will sadly come to an end. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. Thanks as always for watching, and I'll see you again with another new game for a classic console.